Hello everybody, I've Chen here. In one of my recent videos, I discussed the best possible cake farm design at minimum star level and 0 passive skill investment. This got me curious, what would be the maximum cakes per hour you could get from 120 pal and 115 pal base in 1 hour with maximum star levels and perfect passive skills? While I was doing this project, I decided to test out a bunch of things, and here is what I found. There are a bunch of ways to easily increase the efficiency of your farm. The first thing I noticed is that sometimes my plantations were yielding me 15 berries, sometimes 20, and even sometimes 25. I decided to test out to see what was causing this. At first I thought it was the harvest level of pals, so I used level 1 through level 4 harvest pals. During testing, I found that this was most likely not what was affecting the plantations, as no matter the level of the pals, after a certain amount of harvests, they would fluctuate from 15 to 25, even though it did seem that the higher level pals yielded 25 more often. My second theory is that the total level of watering plus harvesting plus planting was what determined the amount of yield. I tested this with a bunch of level 1 in these skills and a bunch of level 4 plus, and received differing amounts of different pairings. In conclusion, I'm not entirely sure what determines crop yield in this game, but I know it has something to do with the watering plus harvesting plus planting levels of pals. My theory is that the increase in watering plus harvesting plus planting increases the minimum amount of berries or wheat that you can get from a harvest. So if you have a 5 in watering, a 5 in harvesting, and a 5 in planting, you will always get that 25 amount. But if you have a 5 in watering, a 5 in harvesting, and only a 4 in planting, you can roll between 20 and 25. And if we go down all the way to a level 1, level 1, level 1, you'll be able to get any amount from 5 to 25. So 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25 from a single harvest. One takeaway from my test though is that you should almost never use pals with the transporting trait, as they'll spend about half of their time doing nothing trying to transport items that your Flopies are already handling. The second thing I noticed is that the farm layout would get too large for the range of Flopies, because Flopies don't have the same range as your base. But if you simply level up your Flopies, their range will increase to encompass your entire base if you're standing near the center. Additionally, while we're on the topic of Flopies will not loot items from plantations if they're even partially floating, so make sure that all your plantations are completely on the floor or a foundation where you place them. As you can see in this clip, this plantation is sticking out pretty far from this foundation, and the Flopie refuses to pick up the berries no matter how I move or what I do. My third tip is that in my previous video I omitted using salads. Salads are actually very overpowered in this game and will increase your productivity of your pals by about 30%. But what is more overpowered about this is that the salads stack multiplicatively with passive buffs such as Artisan. So let's say you have an Artisan pal with 150% of their work speed. Instead of going to a 180% with a 30% increase, it would go to 195 because we take 150 and multiply that by that 130 bonus. This is extra good with berry farming method over cows and chickens, as cows and chickens are not affected by work speed. Additionally, salads are better than berries because they have about 5.6 times the nutritional value of berries, which will make your pals go to the feeding box about 5.6 times less. For a farm of about 20 pals, I recommend about 2 lettuce to 2 tomato patches, and for a farm with 15 pals, I recommend 2 lettuce and 1 tomato patches. You may be able to do less than this, but I found this is the minimum that I needed for my layout. So the last tip I have for you guys is one of the most important tips on this list, as if this is not done correctly, it can completely derail the efficiency of your base. To increase the farming efficiency, make sure that you have clear paths around your base, and you don't have low ceilings where your pals can get stuck on. The biggest offenders of getting stuck are Jormuntides and ranch animals. I've noticed that Jormuntide can get stuck outside of base walls, under base ceilings, on top of feeding box, and pretty much anywhere. So to increase your farm's efficiency, try building your base in an unrateable location so you don't have to build those walls around your base, and try to avoid low ceilings. Additionally, try not to use boss pals or shinies, even though they are much cooler. So I recommend if you are using that boss Jormuntide to breed it down to a regular Jormuntide so that can fit easily around your base. The other big offender by getting stuck are ranch animals. Ranch animals, for some reason, love walking circles on the outside of their ranch. This can cause them to get stuck if there's anything on the outside perimeter of their ranch, so make sure that when you place a ranch, there's nothing on the outside of it. Additionally, you can place a feeding box on the inside of your ranch so that pals don't have a reason to leave their plantation and will stay inside to eat food from that feeder inside of their ranch. Additionally, if you're feeling extra barbaric, you can even place a wall at the entrance of your ranch to make sure that they cannot leave. Keep in mind though, if you do place a wall and you have a feeding box inside of your ranch, make sure that you place your ranches as far away from your other pals as possible so they do not try to eat out of the feeding box that's inside of your ranch and get stuck inside of your ranch. Okay, as I stated in the start of my video, I gathered all these tips while trying to find the maximum cakes you can get per hour with a perfect setup, and here are the results of that math. The math will be at the end of the video for anyone who is curious on the math itself. So for a 20 pal base, you'll be able to get about 658 cakes per hour, and with a 15 pal base, you'll be able to get about 478 cakes per hour. As for the layouts, a 20 pal base will need 88 berry plantations, 24 wheat plantations, 3 ranches, a flower box, a water fountain, a mill, 1 or 2 electric cookers, and 1 power generator, as well as 2 Jormuntide, 6 Lylene, 1 Jormuntide Ignis, and 11 Beguard. For the 15 pal base, you will need 64 berry plantations, 18 wheat plantations, 2 ranches, a flower box, a water fountain, a mill, 1 or 2 electric cookers, and 1 power generator, as well as a Jormuntide, 5 Lilene, 1 Jormuntide Ignis, and 8 Beegard. One thing to keep in mind is that all these calculations do not include a use of a monitoring stand. So if you are using a monitoring stand, it will scale up the amount of plantations you have linearly with the amount of a buff that it gives. Okay, now for the fun part, let's get into the math. I'm going to be very brief when it comes to the math section, and I'm just going to tell you the general gist of what I do in each portion of the math, because there's a lot of math involved in this. And it would take me about 10 to 15 minutes just to go through all of it if I was telling you every single step. So the first step that we have is to find our ratio. So what we are doing here is finding out how many pals it takes to produce 1 cake per hour. 1 cake takes 75 cooked berries, converted to eggs and milk, 8 raw berries, 2 honey, and 15 wheat. So we need to find out how many Lilene it takes for 83 berries, how many Beegards for 2 honey, how many Lilene and Jormuntide for 15 wheat, and how many Jormuntide Ignis to cook cakes and 75 berries, and then finally how many Jormuntide to make 5 flour at the mill. So the first step is to find out how many Jormuntide and Lilene it takes to make 83 berries per hour. So our first step is to find out how many plantations each of our pals can run per hour. This will give us the number 21.7 for Lilene and 95.4 for Jormuntide. Next, we need to find out how many berries a plantation can earn in a single hour, so that we can multiply that number by our plantations per pal to get a total amount of berries that they can produce per hour. This will then allow us to divide 83 for 1 cake by that amount to see how many of each we need to produce 83 berries. We simply take the rate of 120 honey per hour, divide it into 2 honey per cake to get our 0.0167 Beegard per hour. Next, we have to find out how much of each pal it takes to produce 15 wheat per hour. To do this, we do the exact same steps as we did for the berries up top, and we get these numbers down here. The next step was to find how many Jormuntide Ignis it takes to cook 1 cake and 75 berries in an hour. This math is very simple. We simply find out how long it takes for them to cook 75 berries, add that to the time it takes to cook 1 cake, and then divide that by 3,600 seconds in an hour to get 0.0013 Jormuntide Ignis per cake per hour. The last step is to find how many Jormuntide it takes to make 5 flour. This is also very simple. It is the exact same process as above, except we don't have to add anything together. The final part of our equation is that we have a constant. The constant is the salad production. Salad production will always be 2 lettuce and 2 tomato plantations for a 20 pal base, and 1 tomato and 2 lettuce plantations for a 15 pal base. This math is very similar to the math above, and we get the results as you can see here. So we have our ratio. Now we need to scale it up to a 20 pal and 15 pal farm. So we add up our ratio. We have 19.346 pal slots available for our 20 pal base and 14.346 pal slots available for our 15 pal base. We get this number because we have to subtract the amount it takes for our constant to produce the salads. We divide that by our 0.0276 ratio that we got just now, and we get a theoretical max cakes per hour, which is 700 and 519.8. Unfortunately, these are only theoretical because this includes a decimal of a pal, and unfortunately we cannot have part of a pal, so we need to round to the nearest whole number. To find how many pals we have, we just add up our ratio numbers per pal and multiply it by the cake ratio per hour to get 1.41 Jormuntide, 5.992 Lilene, 0.91 Jormuntide Ignis, and 11.69 Beegards. The most efficient way to round is, as you can see here, 2 Jormuntide, 6 Lilene, 1 Jormuntide Ignis, and 11 Beegards. And then finally, we need to calculate our losses due to rounding down that 11.69 Beegard to 11. We simply take that and multiply that by its honey rate, and then divide it by 2 per cake to get 42 cakes lost, which gives us 658 cakes per hour maximum. We do those exact same steps for the 15 pal base to get 478.8 cakes per hour maximum. To calculate the amount of plantations we need, we take our rate of how much a single plantation can produce that we found earlier up at the top. We take our amount that we can produce in cakes per hour, multiply that by the amount of resource we need, so 658 times 85 berries, 55,930 berries required per hour, and then divide that by how much a single plantation can earn per hour to get our amount of plantations. It'll be 88 berry plantations and 24 wheat plantations. Additionally, we need 3 ranches because 11 Beegards is held by 3 ranches. It's 4 Beegards per ranch. We do the exact same math for the 15 pal base, and we get 64 berry plantations and 18 wheat plantations. Thank you for watching this video, and if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I greatly appreciate you guys watching till the end. If you have any ideas for any future videos or want to see any other calculations done or have any questions about my math, because I did go over it very briefly in this video, just put them in the comments. I generally read all my comments, so I will reply to you as soon as possible. Thank you and good luck, guys.